Welcome to Standards Not Force. A special thank you to those of you who continue sending thank yous to members of law enforcement and to our young men and women in our military, reminding them that no matter what, remember their oath to the Constitution. Special thank yous go out to those of you who are continuing to celebrate Gift Giving Mondays by giving small gifts to friends, strangers, and neighbors, showing love for one another and rebuilding strong communities, and wishing them the best in the week ahead that follows. This video was scheduled to be part 2, and profits belong to the American taxpayer. That would be our next video. I felt this one was much more pressing, so today I'm speaking as a Black Panther from the 60s, who's returned to the United States and see what is happening in our country today. So we're going back to the future. Today we are living through a dangerous illusion. Millions of citizens believe that democracy is protected simply because we still hold elections. They believe that if something goes wrong, Congress will fix it. They believe that institutions will correct themselves. They believe that protests by their mere existence will force change. That belief is comforting, and it is wrong. Democracy does not defend itself. It never has, and it never will. It survives only when citizens act with discipline, clarity, and purpose. Right now across this country, protests are happening everywhere, every weekend, in almost every major city. But ask a simple question. What exactly is the objective? What is the demand? What is the grievance? What measurable outcome must be achieved before the protest ends? Too often there is no answer. And when there is no answer, there is no power. Because spectacle is not strategy. Noise is not leverage. Gathering is not governance. A protest without defined objectives is not a movement. It is a social event. And social events do not change the course of a nation. If the DOJ is not functioning to serve all American citizens, if the Department of Homeland Security isn't functioning to serve all American citizens, if the White House is not functioning to serve all American citizens, if the Department of Defense is not functioning to serve and protect all American citizens, the Supreme Court, the U.S. Congress, and your city and state politicians aren't functioning to serve you as a citizen, what then? Stay with me in this video, and I'll tell you what we must do to those institutions who currently aren't serving American citizens. It'll be demanding and hard work. Some of you would not be able to rise to the occasion to do that work. Some of you will feel your lives are comfortable, even if we become a dictatorship. And you will continue to sit on the couch. Those of you who would not accept the takeover of your government and its institutions will have the energy to sustain the fight. In the 1960s, we marched with purpose. We marched for voting rights, women's rights. We marched for desegregation. We marched for specific laws, specific rulings, and specific institutional changes. We did not simply gather to express frustration. We organized to achieve results. There were grievances we wanted addressed. There were actionable demands, and we wanted them done. There were timelines we had set and expect those in power to meet. There was leadership, there was discipline, and most importantly, there was persistence. We did not disband because we were tired. We did not disperse because the cameras left. We did not declare victory because we trended on social media. We stayed engaged until objectives were met. That is what effective, lawful, and nonviolent civic action looks like. It is not spontaneous. It is not emotional. It is structured, strategic, and sustained. In today's protest marches, there's passion without planning, energy without direction, numbers without objectives, and without objectives, power dissolves. More than 100 million registered voters in this country are waiting for the next election. Less than 5 million of them is all that is needed to change the trajectory of how our country is going. We stop watching events unfold. We stop discussing politics. We stop debating outcomes. That's waiting, and waiting is not a strategy. Elections are not guaranteed by tradition. They are guaranteed by systems, safeguards, and civic vigilance. If we want elections to occur, we must ensure the conditions that make elections possible. Free elections require independent courts, functioning election administration, public trust in outcomes, protection from intimidation, and institutional accountability. None of these conditions maintain themselves automatically. They exist because citizens insist they exist. And when citizens stop insisting, systems erode. That erosion does not happen overnight. It happens gradually, quietly, procedurally. And by the time people realize what has changed, the mechanisms of correction are already weakened. So let us be honest. Many current protests lack focus. They express anger, they express fear, they express dissatisfaction, but expression is not execution. If there are no defined grievances, no written demands, no achievable objections, and no measurable milestones, then power does not feel pressure. It feels noise. Weekend gatherings across scattered locations do not create leverage. They create diffusion. When attention is scattered, influence is diluted. When demands are vague, responses are symbolic. When objectives are undefined, outcomes are non-existent. Democracy requires organized seriousness, not episodic expression. Now here's the central truth. If we want change, we must behave like stakeholders and not like spectators. And as stakeholders, we define what is wrong, what must change, what outcome is required, and what timeline is acceptable. We document grievances, we articulate demands, we organize legally and strategically. We sustain engagement until our desired outcomes are achieved. We do not assume that elected officials will act simply because we hope they will. We create lawful, disciplined, civic pressure that compels them through legitimacy, persistence, and numbers. That is how democracies are preserved. Voting is essential, but voting is periodic. Democracy is continuous. Elections occur every 2 years, 4 years, 6 years. But governance decisions occur every day. Policies are drafted daily. Regulations are enforced daily. Judicial rulings shape society daily. If civic engagement only appears during election season, then the vast majority of decision making occurs without sustained public oversight. That imbalance weakens democracy. Voting chooses representatives. Civic engagement holds them accountable between elections. Without that accountability, representation becomes symbolic rather than responsive. Real democratic change is not theatrical, it is procedural. It involves research, coalition building, legal advocacy, policy drafting, sustained public communication, measurable benchmarks, institutional flow-through, and all of this is work. It's not glamorous. It is not quick. It does not produce instant gratification, but it does produce results. If we as citizens are unwilling to do that work, then protests become rituals rather than instruments. And rituals, no matter how passionate, do not change systems. There is a psychological comfort in gathering with like-minded people. It creates a sense of solidarity. It creates a sense of participation. But participation without strategy creates the illusion of progress without the reality of change. We can march every weekend for months and still have no defined objective achieved. Because change is not measured by turnout, it is measured by outcome. We look at the outcomes and we ask, have policies changed? Have safeguards been implemented? Have institutional commitments been secured? Have measurable protections been established? If the answer to those are no, then the effort has not yet reached effectiveness. If we are concerned about the future of our democracy, we must recognize a difficult truth. No institution will save a nation whose citizens are passive. Not Congress, not courts, not political parties, not our leaders. Institutions respond to organized, sustained, lawful civic engagement. They rarely act in anticipation of it. Waiting for rescue is not civic strategy. It is civic surrender. We as citizens must decide what kind of nation we want. Then we must engage in the disciplined work required to secure it. That includes defining grievances clearly, articulating lawful demands precisely, organizing sustained engagement, and holding leadership accountable through legitimate civic mechanisms. Effective civic action begins with clarity. We ask, what specifically is the concern? What institutional safeguard is required? What policy change is needed? What measurable condition must be met? Without clarity, energy disperses. With clarity, our energy concentrates. A focused objective gives citizens direction. Direction creates leverage. Leverage creates results. Our democracy is not protected by outrage. It is protected by organized seriousness. As serious citizens, we do not just react, we plan. We coordinate. We implement. As serious citizens, we recognize that preserving democratic systems is not a one-day event. It is a sustained civic responsibility. We must understand that change requires endurance, not just intensity. Intensity creates attention. Endurance creates transformation. So we, as the American people, now face a choice. We can continue engaging in scattered, symbolic expressions of concern, hoping that institutions will respond on their own. Or we can organize lawfully, peacefully, and strategically around clearly defined democratic safeguards with measurable objectives and sustained engagement until those objectives are achieved. One path is emotionally satisfying but strategically weak. The other is demanding, disciplined, and effective. All hard work, but we must put in the work and save our country. History shows which path preserves nations. Democracy is not guaranteed by history. It is guaranteed by we, American citizens, who take responsibility for it. Not occasionally, not emotionally, but consistently, strategically, lawfully, and with measurable purpose. If we, Americans, want our democracy to endure, we must move beyond spectacle and commit to the hard, sustained work of civic engagement. That work is not easy. It requires patience, it requires planning, it requires discipline, but the alternative is far more costly. Because when citizens treat democracy as self-sustaining, they eventually discover that it is not. And by the time they realize it, the systems that once protected them may already be weakened. Democracy does not defend itself. We, the people, must defend it with clarity, with discipline, with lawful strategy, and with unwavering commitment to the outcomes we seek to achieve. The future of this nation will not be decided by noise. It will be decided by organized, sustained, purposeful civil action. The question is no longer whether we, as Americans, care. The question is whether we are willing to do the hard work required to ensure that our nation and democracy endures. And social events do not change the course of a nation. And now to get back to my point. If the DOJ, Department of Justice, is not functioning to serve all American citizens, in the 60s, we would surround the DOJ building. About 1 million serious citizens would just lawfully, non-violently surround the building in Washington and set in until our grievances or demands were met. No one would come and go through the mass of people. It would be a lawful protest, it would be a nonviolent protest, and it would present no harm to others. We would only be stopping the engagement of business as usual by delaying the coming and goings of those who work inside the building. It would not be an insurrection like J6. J6, they destroyed our Capitol building and defaced it. J6, Steve Bannon and MAGA is almost doing the same thing, except they use pizzas with messages that they're going to cause harm to a politician or the politician's loved ones. They threaten. We don't threat, and we don't hide. We're out in the open, and we make our demands, and we wait to see if our demands prevail with action. If the Department of Homeland Security isn't functioning to serve all American citizens, we do the same. We surround it, and limited comings and goings, with sit-ins. 1,000,000 people. There's not enough jails to hold 1,000,000 people. And there's not enough soldiers to tear gas 1,000,000 people. It's not harassment. It's a lawful civic action. If the White House is not functioning to serve all American citizens, we do the same. Remember the March on Washington. That's what was done. Nobody got arrested. Nobody got tear gassed. It was a non-violent, civic, non-threatening protest with the policies of the American government was implementing against citizens of darker skin. If the Department of Defense is not functioning to serve and protect all American citizens, we sit in around the Pentagon. Same thing. These are things we would do in the 60s. That's not really occurring today. But we actually are dealing with the same problems we dealt with in the 60s. But for some reason, our protests, our marches are not accomplishing what we would have accomplished if we were in the 60s. Because we had demands, we had grievances, and when we protested and when we marched, we made sure that those leaders or those responsible in those institutions understood our demands, understood our grievances. If the Supreme Court isn't functioning to preserve the institution and democracy according to the Constitution, we do the same thing. And we demand that they do. We don't leave until they do. We don't send pizzas. We don't send threatening notes. We don't talk about harming someone's family or their family members. We send a message by strength. 1,000,000 of us saying we won't tolerate this anymore. That's civic maturity. The U.S. Congress, same thing. We send strong messages. And your city and state politicians, same thing. We send strong messages. Can't wait for voting every so often. Meanwhile, what's happening to the conditions of the people in the country? We as citizens must take our own actions and demand what it is we want from the politicians. This work begins now, and it must begin with seriousness. Now, I'm going back to the 60s. But if you want me to stay here and assist you, I'll be on the front lines, leading the charge. I'm willing to do that. But if you're just willing to accept the status quo and willing to live in a dictatorship, I can't participate in that. I'd rather live in my memories of those 60s. That's when our actions changed the nation. So look for part 2 on how we get our taxes returned from corporate profits. We have legislation that's being drafted for that. So stay tuned for that. Don't forget to click the notification bell, like and subscribe. We have 46,000 subscribers. We would like to hit 100,000 subscribers. On March the 30th, in a couple of weeks, we start our initiative in Minneapolis, St. Paul, of standards, not force, protecting American citizens from deportations, locking up children, and destroying families. There, we will help create safe communities and safe neighborhoods and create safety zones in Minneapolis and St. Paul. Former Black Panther, all power to the people. See you at the next video.